Welcome everyone to Deep Drinks Podcast. Did the Bible descend from the heavens? God's flawless blueprint for mankind? Or were its authors shaped by the historical context and writings echoing their epoch? Let's dive deep as we explore this mystery. Deep drinkers, I'd like to formally introduce a friend of the show, a friend of mine, just an all-around great guy, Dr. Matthew Monger, who's an associate professor of Near Eastern languages and literature at the MF Norwegian School of Theology. His main research interests lie in the languages and texts of the ancient Near East, including Akkadian, Hebrew, Syriac/Aramaic, Ethiopic, and Arabic. He delves into the intersections and connections between texts written in these languages. In addition to his teaching role, Matthew is also the program director for the bachelor's degree in Theology of Religion and Society at the MF Norwegian School of Theology. It's my honor to welcome for the second time on Deep Drinks, Dr. Matthew Monger. Welcome.
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
I just realized it's not the second time, but it's the second time you've been on Deep Drinks podcast, but you've been on panels and stuff. But
yeah,
the podcast section, second time.
Yeah, whatever. It's How
you been, man?
Send you my resume next time. No, we're good. I'm good. It's really weird. I've been traveling a lot. I've been in the U.S. and then in Italy this summer, and it was like hot. And I came back to Norway this week, and it's like 12 degrees Celsius and raining. It's so cold and so wet, and so it's just it's such a funny thing.
Do you prefer the cold, or do you prefer like the heat?
I prefer the heat, but I like the change. I like mixing things up because it does get hot. It does get tiring with those 40-degree days day after day.
Oh. But, I can't do heat. Hey, I run hot. Like I sweat in the middle of winter, like inside of like a air conditioned grocery store. So like, we actually my wife and I, we did a big world trip, and on that world trip we only did carry on, and we did Japan in the winter, Europe in the winter, and then Thailand, but it was summer back in Thailand. So it was a wild trip. But I remember when we got to Thailand, I was like, okay. Like all our clothes were useless, and we just like, let's go. We went walking around the shops at night and like picked up some singlets and thongs and stuff, and it was awesome. But yeah, it's just a weird shift to being freezing and then hot. So I know what it's like. Matthew, what are we drinking?
Oh yeah, so today we are on Jameson Irish whiskey.
And I got we got 2 liters. I was going to put that in the promotion that we've got 2 liters of whiskey, but I thought I better not.
And this is kind of a go-to drink anyway, but my dad's name is James. And so like I consider myself literally James's son. And so it's like there's a special thing. We call ourselves like the clan of Jim. Like we call him Jim. So it's like
nice.
We have our own little thing, it's but yeah, so Jameson is special to me.
Nice. There's an old family like rumor, I guess, or we're still trying to work out how true it is, but in Amy's side of the family, it goes right back to Hague Distillery in Scotland. And the great grandfather was like, he was arrested for making whiskey on the Sabbath, and then his son went on to make Hague Distillery, and then the daughter of like that son ended up marrying James Jameson and moving over to Ireland or something. So I don't know how true any of this is. This feels very much like one of those like
myths from the Bible.
yeah. So, but it'd be cool if that happened. So, but I like to say that whiskey flows through our blood. So, with that saying, I got my whiskey glass And I was just wondering, is this the right size?
Sure. I've got
is that?
a little tumbler.
Oh, okay. I better. If I didn't realize, I didn't realize this was an amateur. I'll have to get my other whiskey glasses. Normal size whiskey glass. That's better. Okay. And do you have it on the rocks?
I am today. I'm doing that because I don't know how long this is going to go, and I figure if I'm just drinking straight whiskey, it may, on a Friday evening in Norway, All right, so should we crack them?
Yeah, let's crack them. I got. I'll pour myself a generous helping because for me it's 1:40 a.m. So hopefully, with enough of it, I'll go straight to sleep afterwards.
I hope you go straight to sleep anyway. But
cheers,
man.
Oh, it's been a while since I've had Jameson. That's delicious. Okay, so let's jump into it. So I want you to think back. So you've told a part of your story when you came on Deep Drinks last time, and you talked about, getting interested in scholarship but there must have been a time when you didn't know the stuff that we're going to talk about today. So I want you to first bring us back to that time when you first started noticing or seeing these similarities between, ancient Mesopotamian texts and say Genesis or other areas. What did you think of that? And were you a Christian at the time? And how did you approach it, and what did you first think?
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to remember exactly like the order of things. I mean, even though it's my life, I think I have my own mythology of how things happened. But like, so I was studying theology. So this would have been in 2002, 2003, 2004, something like that. And we had done kind of an intro to the Bible and stuff, and move on to like the more intermediate stuff. And that was when I got like introduced to, I think I talked about this the concept of the the lack of the undying soul in the Hebrew Bible, and the problems of thinking that the way one conceives of humans and souls and all that kind of stuff is the same in ancient Hebrew literature as it is in Greek or in modern thinking or whatever. And so that was kind of my first awakening of that things are different. And then after that, we started on Hebrew and Greek. And so it was like a year of pounding away at Hebrew and Greek. And when we got through that, I was frustrated because I kept asking questions like, why is it like this? And they kept saying, well, it just is. That's just the way it is. And I'm like, surely there's an explanation. So I started studying linguistics to try and find explanations for things. And I had to pick a minor in that linguistics degree. And I picked Semitic languages. And that was like literally, that is what like changed the course of my life, I would say, because when I picked this, the professor, I went and had a chat with this professor, Lutz Edzard, this German professor who was in Oslo at the time, who, says like, yeah, come take Akkadian. It's going to be amazing. It'll change your life. And I'm like, okay, sure. And we went and took Akkadian, and like I remember we lived in this little town. It's an hour and a half from where we live now. And that summer, I ordered John Hunegard's Grammar of Akkadian, which is this like giant book that he says should be able to be done in the better part of an academic year. It's kind of like it's a textbook for a year of Akkadian, and I remember getting that and just like opening it and seeing the cuneiform and like feeling the chills, feeling like I'm entering a new dimension. It was just like it was crazy. It was such a big thing, and then it turns out that we're reading things like Gilgamesh and Hammurabi, so the epic of Gilgamesh and the laws of Hammurabi in this book and in this course, and even though I had kind of done the intro to the Bible and all these kind of started getting into that on the theology side, like we'd never really read the texts. Like you read about that there's some connections with ancient Mesopotamia, and you read that about that there are things in the Bible which have connections and stuff like that. But we had never actually read the texts, and so it was kind of like the thing with deciding to do linguistics, that because the Hebrew and Greek people were like, just accept it. I was kind of like, well, I want to know why. And it was that moment when I realized I can read these texts that they say there might be connection or there's similar things. And so during that first year of Akkadian, we read all of Gilgamesh and started reading, read all of Hammurabi and started reading Gilgamesh. And so I joined this reading group. They called it the Oslo Sumerian Akkadian Seminar or something. And basically, it was three older gentlemen, one professor, and then two older gentlemen, we'll call them that. and we read together like every Friday afternoon, and it was just mind-boggling. So we read through like through the cuneiform, sign by sign, word by word, through Hammurabi, Gilgamesh. We read this story, the Babylonian Theodicy. I'll tell you about that later. And we read Enuma Elish. We read all these kind of stories, and reading them slowly, like sitting together with other people, where you read every line and discuss what it means. It really changes the way you see things. Like reading slowly. Like I just can't emphasize enough how important it is when you're engaging with stuff. That it's fun to be able to get in loads and loads of information at once, but sometimes just reading so slowly that you feel it in a different way. And so that process of studying the Semitic languages, then I went on to do my MA in Semitic languages as well. Just because it got me so excited. I mean, it was just like, that was such a huge thing to start reading these things. And yeah, I mean, I was still studying theology. I was still, because same professor, Lutzadzar, told me, like, don't stop studying theology. You need to get a master's in theology because you'll get a job. If you do Semitics and theology, you'll get a job. If you just do Semitics, there's not much in it.
Yeah. Wow. So it's clear that you have such a passion for languages. So okay, first of all, is what's our first language that we have, like in the world?
Oldest attested language, is that what you mean?
Well, first describe what attested means, and then
so like, I mean, I don't think we can talk about the oldest language in existence, because languages are well, with some very few exceptions, languages are products of developments from other languages. And so we really can't we can't place the times of all the branchings of all the languages specifically. So it would be silly to talk about like any modern language as being older, and even the ancient ones are so young compared to the depth of human history and language history, that's just that within the past 6,000 years we've started writing, and that's what makes the difference. And so the first written languages are Sumerian and Egyptian. So we have Sumerian a little bit earlier, and then Egyptian is there, and then Akkadian shows up on the scene very quickly.
Is Akkadian is like is it Babylon?
Right. So Akkadian is the term we use for the oldest layer of what later becomes Babylonian and Assyrian. So the Akkadian Empire, the Akkadian Kingdom is right there in Iraq and Mesopotamia, and is basically what grows as Sumer is fading in a way. So Akkad is growing, and then Babylon and Assyria are both using the Akkadian language, but they develop slightly differently so that we get very distinct dialects, so that you can when you read, you see very specific features that make you know that you're dealing with an Assyrian text or a Babylonian text, but the basics are the same. So once you've learned either Assyrian or Babylonian, then you can easily adapt to the other dialects.
Okay, interesting. So, when you first when you first started to notice these things, was it like a did it affect your faith at all, or was it just interesting? Was it something that you were just like, I want to dive into this?
So I honestly don't know. I think so. Consciously, it didn't affect my faith. It didn't hurt my faith at all. So, like in my way of, I guess I'm someone who accepts those things that are placed before me. So it was very difficult. There was no reason for me to fight it, that these things were there. And so for me, it was just interesting that this was the fact. And so then when you start reading and you see that, well, since the 18 or early 1900s, when these texts are being deciphered and being written about, there's been these kind of fluctuations of ways of dealing with it. That first people are saying, "Oh my God, we've proved the Bible is just a bunch of crap and it's all made up." And then you get people that say, "Well, no, you're wrong. It's still perfectly, inspired." And then you get that middle ground that starts to develop, where people say, "Oh, well, here is another expression of an ancient Near Eastern text, which is clearly related to the other Near Eastern contexts," which is kind of then where scholarship goes, that we understand that Israel is not something that's in a vacuum. Judah is not in a vacuum, free from exposure to the cultures and the lands around it. And so it makes perfect sense that when you see similar styles of writing in Babylon, in Assyria, in Canaan, that you would also then find it among the Judahites and the Israelites. That it's just a natural, understandable thing. And so for me, that then wasn't a faith issue. It was just more of a practical issue. And then, I mean, I guess you deal with it in different ways with your faith. You say, "Oh, well, then God inspired the biblical authors to rewrite it in a different way." And that's where inspiration comes in. And so I guess it's always modifying your views, your faith, your thinking in different ways. But I wasn't conscious of that, because I still felt very committed to the faith. And so it didn't feel like I was negotiating away my faith at that point.
Yeah.
But looking back, I see where there's getting like chinks in the wall.
Yeah. And like if your faith would eventually develop, it seems. I've had a friend come over recently, and they were very big on, they didn't understand. We will get into this later, but they didn't understand. And I don't fully understand like history. How do we know the difference between like this happened between this time and this time? Like, how do you to a lot of people, these are just scribbles on tablets or things that we pull out of the dust and go, must be like to a lot of people it feels like guesswork. And I do want to get into the history of that, but later. But one of the things I brought up with my friend is the Epic of Gilgamesh and its linking with the story of Noah and like the story of the Bible, and how it seems so clear. And the question that kind of like the things that were brought back to me were, well, do you know that most almost every culture in the world has a flood narrative, as if there was actually a global flood, or there was some sort of a flood, and they all recorded it. And so of course the Akkadians were going to record the flood because it happened. And so and whereabouts they kind of land, like how do we know that the Bible didn't write it first, or the Akkadians were using some lost form of the Bible? And so I didn't have an answer, except for the fact that all I can do is point to scholarship and say, well, scholars and historians don't, like, no one's saying that the Bible came first and then the Epic of Gilgamesh was written. So could you maybe walk us along that road towards explaining how the similarities between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the story of Genesis?
Yeah. So I think, if we just kind of let's stick to the flood narrative within it, just not so we don't confuse people. But the Epic of Gilgamesh is a much larger epic, and it's attested quite early, and so it's attested before any biblical text is attested. So let's just start with that. Like that's one way of looking at it historically, is that we can come up with theories about texts being older than their attestations. So attestations, I mean, like when we find them, where do we find witnesses or like tablets or copies of manuscripts or anything? And there is no biblical text that is attested earlier than Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh, if we look at the flood narrative, so just that part, what's really interesting about the flood narrative in Gilgamesh is that it is building on an earlier version of the flood narrative. Okay, so the flood narrative has precursors also, which are even older, which helps us to see that this has been a narrative which has been passed down in a number of different forms. So in the one version, the much pure flood narrative is in the tale of Atrahasis, where that's the name of the hero. But in Gilgamesh, his name is Utnapishtim. So it's a different name. But so what happens in Gilgamesh is basically, I mean, the epic is amazing. It's an amazing story, and I would just, anybody who hasn't read it should just get out and get a copy. There's plenty online, and so Gilgamesh is the king of his land, and he is I don't know, obviously a troublemaker, and so the gods send him a companion. They send him someone to be with, and this creature, falls out of the sky and lands in the woods and has sex with a harlot or something for 7 days and 7 nights, and becomes a man through that. And then Gilgamesh and this guy go off, gallivanting around and having a good time. And then they
I love gallivanting.
Yeah, everybody loves gallivanting.
I mean, it's one of my favorite things to do. Gallivanting. How often
do you gallivant?
Yeah, and scoffing. I love scoffing. Like a lot of people say that. I scoff at the in the end days. The people will scoff. I just love a scoff. Anyway,
yeah, I scoff quite a bit. Especially
it's in choices. It's my sin of choice. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but so what happens is I mean, make a long story short, they end up killing the bull of the gods, and that's not ever a good thing, to kill something belonging to the gods, and so they're punished. And basically Enkidu, who's Gilgamesh's friend, dies, and that is the punishment. And Gilgamesh can't accept that. He has to solve this somehow, and so he goes on a quest to find the tree of life, the plant that gives eternal life. And so he travels, over the river and through the woods, and he gets to the garden, the garden of the gods, where he then goes in, and inside the garden of the gods, he finds the hero from the flood story. And that's where we kind of get the flood narrative into Gilgamesh. We hear about it because it's woven into like a cameo. It's like a cameo appearance inside the Gilgamesh thing. So it's something that the readers would have gotten to and be like, oh, there we are, nice one. And so because the flood hero knows where the tree of life is, this plant that gives life, and it's down in the bottom of this pool in the center of the garden. And so Gilgamesh ties stones to his feet and dives down and grabs this thing and pulls it out and is going to take it back to his city. And on the way, he takes a nap by a pool of water, and a snake comes out, grabs the plant and escapes. And then in the end, then Gilgamesh has to accept that he will never have immortality, and he can't bring his friend back, and all the sad things. And so it's kind of a story about friendship and the epic quest, and also the problem of death, the problem of mortality. And so, but we get this flood story baked into it. And so the flood story, as we have it, is then an iteration of this older flood story, where there is, I mean, basically what happens is that the gods create mankind to do their tilling and their working in the garden on Earth, because the gods obviously don't want to have to spend all their time working their gardens that they made, and the humans make too much noise and bother the gods, and so the gods say, let's get rid of these creatures. And there's that one god, the one who was responsible for making the humans, that says, no, please, let's not do this. And so he warns the one guy who is told to build a boat, because this is all going to happen, and bring along the animals so that they can repopulate the earth. And they float around. In the Akkadian story, they float around for 7 days, and everything is flooded, and then they hop off the boat and repopulate the earth, and everybody's happy, happy, happy. So it's the narrative of it is just so strikingly similar to what we have in Noah, the Noah story. And there's
even like the bird. Isn't there like a bird that he sends out? It's been a while since I've read it, and I'm sorry, I did not read it slowly. That what you said, that really, like, I need to read things slowly because I've got a bit of dyslexia, so I'll like listen to things, and I'll listen to them on like 2x speed sometimes. But when it comes to, like, I've realized when it comes to like philosophy or religious texts, it's very hard to. You get like the very broad strokes, but you don't actually understand the core tenets unless you like sit down with like a ruler and like go line by line and just like, make sure you understand things. So I really appreciate what you said there, but yeah, so didn't they have a similar situation with, as sort of Noah, where he sent off a dove or a bird? It was a different bird that he sent off and it came back with an olive branch or something.
Yep, it's the exact same. I mean, the entire scheme of how things take place it overlaps completely. And so what we see in it is the. And then of course there's the offering at the end. I think that's kind of what seals the deal for a lot of people when you get to the point where like they get off and then they build an altar and sacrifice something, and then the gods smell the sacrifice, and they're like, dude, that's what we want. Like, give us a barbecue, like burn us some meat and we'll be happy. And that's kind of what then becomes, okay, well, as long as you then sacrifice to us in the future, then we won't kill you. It's and this, so I think just the fact that it exists, right, this story exists, is interesting in its own right, and that kind of goes into the methodology question of like, well, what do you do with it then? Like, so you read something, you say, well, this flood narrative also exists, and we can say, okay, well, how would we go about asking the questions of whether something is older? If we assume that texts are true, okay, then you basically just pick whatever text you like the best and then just claim that's the one, right? So that's a way of thinking about the value or the truth of something that says that certain texts contain truth, whereas others ones don't. And that is it's very, very difficult as a historian to find good, legitimate reasons for accepting things that we find archaeologically. So you dig up clay tablets, or you dig up scrolls, or you dig up whatever. It's very, very difficult to establish which text you would assume to be truthful about past events and which ones you would assume to not be, right? So that's an immediate problem, is that by singling out a certain group of texts and saying that they have something based on other methodologies, which would be like saying, well, we have theology that shows us that these are the true ones. Well, that's a different methodology than the historical one. So if we can't do that, if we can't say, well, we're going to trust the Bible before anything else or over anything else, then like the next thing we would want to do is look at, well, what are these things, right? What is this? And for me as a historian, especially as a historian of literature, a text historian, what I'm interested in is knowing, first of all, when do we find these things? So in this case, the oldest version of the flood story would be the Dead Sea Scrolls, so probably 2nd century BC, and the oldest attested versions of the flood story in Akkadian are 18th, 19th century BC. So already there, like in the physicalness, like there is a massive difference. Now, it's possible that it's certain that we don't have everything from antiquity. So there could have been previous texts, and there, of course, could be oral traditions and all these kind of things. So it doesn't help us that much to talk about when we find the things, but I think it's more tangible to talk about it than to talk about some things being better than others, just because. And then if we take a step beyond that, then we can look at these, we can look at the way things are integrated into their current contexts. And so when we look at the way the flood story is integrated into its current context, it is part of a very small collection of texts, which all have a very interesting connection to Mesopotamia and other Mesopotamian texts. So the first 11 chapters of Genesis, they are actually quite, they're quite short, and it's the creation stories, the two different creation stories. We get the Cain and Abel thing, we have some genealogies, and then we have the flood story, and then we have the spreading of the populations of the world, and the Tower of Babel. And it's this kind of like prehistory, and these things, many of these texts are very closely related to other Mesopotamia. Speaking
the whiskey's taking effect. Yeah, the whiskey's taking effect.
Holy Spirit, it's the Holy Spirit. But it's, and it relates to other Mesopotamian texts, and then we move on from after that to the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph stories, where the Mesopotamian analogies are very, very different. So the first 11 chapters of the Bible have this thing where we see many different kinds of Mesopotamian sources that are reflected in the source material, and we find the flood story then integrated into this kind of source building thing. And so when you read the story of Atrahasis, so the earlier flood story in Akkadian, it is definitely it's definitely its own text. Okay, so it's not integrated into something new, and so it's part of a literary world where it's being written and transmitted independently, and then we see it shows up in Gilgamesh as a part of a larger epic narrative. And in that way, it's similar to what happens in the Bible, that this epic of the kind of the movement from the creation up until Abraham's birth, which is the first 11 chapters of Genesis, is it takes this flood narrative in as one of its building blocks, just like Gilgamesh does.
So okay, that's interesting. So I've heard Dr. Josh talk about this idea, and Dr. Kip Davis talk about this idea that the goal of the primeval history in Genesis was a polemic against Mesopotamian society. So it was like a big, like, our God's better, we're better, like what you guys like isn't it. We have the right philosophy, the right ideas, the right perspective. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, so I mean that's the classic numbers. So that's the
Oh, hang on a sec. You're breaking up. I can't see you and I can't hear you.
hello.
I don't know.
It looks
I can
to
hear you
me
now.
okay because I see, everything looks fine on my screen.
Okay.
You blink. You good?
I think so. You're very pixelated. But I can see you and hear you
Okay.
now.
Yeah, weird because you blinked out for a minute on my screen, but I stayed fresh. And
Oh, okay. Yeah, it'll always be fresh on your end, and then you'll look at the video later and you'll be like, and then there's so many times I look at myself and I'm like saying something, I'm like,
yeah.
just frozen. So
All right.
yeah, okay. So
Yeah, like I said earlier, like thunderstorms rolled through at like right when we were going to start earlier, and so the power may blink off at some point. So if you lose me, then I will do my best to get on my phone or something and jump in.
That's okay. Well, we can all hang out and wait for you if that happens. But it should be fine. It looks fine now.
Yeah.
Okay, so what were you saying?
Yeah, so basically the idea of the primeval history as a polemic against the Babylonian hegemony or something, that would be a good term, is consensus in biblical scholarship. I think it's pretty standard. I think I definitely agree that's there. I wonder from my perspective whether it's not as much a stick it to the man polemic as a creating our own version of the things we've been exposed to polemic.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, I think if we're thinking the time after the Babylonian captivity, so we're in the 500s, late 500s, early or in the 300s BC, and this I mean we do have very good historical evidence that the Israelites or the Judites were in in Babylon and would have been exposed to Babylonian things and culture, and so I don't know if everything has to be like this battle, this epic like Yahweh is the one kind of thing, but it's like, hey, so we know that the world was made kind of like this, but what's our story? And we're saying it in a way that it's either develops or at least it's written in a way that is making sense for the people that are hearing it, who still have a Judite Israelite identity, but and have then an idea of who their God is in all this, but who then can still relate to the Babylonian culture which they've been exposed to.
I often wonder if the Gautama Buddha, the Buddha, if he grew up in the Middle East or somewhere else, if he would have the concept of reincarnation, if that would be part of his philosophy, because of course he grows up in Nepal, India kind of area, and he's right in the thick of Hinduism and these ideas about reincarnation, and of course he goes and becomes enlightened, so the story goes, and then in his philosophy there's reincarnation, and it's like, well, of course, but I often wonder if he grew up in Egypt or something, if they would have the same or in anywhere else, if they would have the same philosophies, or if it's just if everything's just a product of if we think of it supernaturally, you could posit anything, but if you think of it naturally, it just seems to make sense, if it's a natural phenomenon of a profound teacher of some sort. And someone did ask a question a while ago saying, are there written languages earlier in East Asia or in other parts of the world, or is it just is that the earliest language, full stop?
So is
written,
as far as I know, there is not an attested written language earlier than the than what we have in the Akkadian, Sumerian stuff. So there are some. There's some. So I want to be precise. Like, so there are some pictographs, like some pictures that have been found in cave drawings and stuff like that, like in China and in East Asia, but they're not a script at that point. And so we're talking about like writing language as a script, which can be productive in that way. And so, but Chinese, I mean, we assume that Chinese was written as early or earlier. We assume that there were other pictographic languages that were written down at different points, but we have no attestations of it. And this is one of the reasons why we have these things, is because it just happens to be that the Egyptians liked to carve things in stone, and the Sumerians like to push things into clay, like etch things into clay, and these are materials that end up surviving. So it's not a there's nothing ideological in having Mesopotamian Egypt be the oldest ones, from my perspective. It would be lovely to find some real evidence of other stuff, but we just don't have it. But Chinese is attested pretty early, but I think it's a millennium later when we have the first actual texts. But everyone assumes that they were being that there were things being done that's kind of proto Chinese script already at an earlier date.
So what you're saying is right, in that what you're saying is that Joe Rogan is right, and there are ancient civilizations with alien technology. So I just want to get that clear. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, isn't it obvious?
That it's just all lost to time. It's just all lost to time.
I don't know why we would argue with Joe Rogan.
Yeah, exactly. Atlantis and everything. I don't know if he believes in Atlantis. He does have some conspiratorial clips about ancient civilizations. But
but I mean, that's pretty popular these days. You know, I've watched some of the stuff, and it's fun. It's fun because there's this kind of idea that you can find a code, and then there's always like some kind of, all these pyramids are aligned across the world in a certain latitude, and so must be, we must all have aliens came down at the same spot.
One of the things that used to drive me nuts was I used to work for a surveying and town planning company. I actually just quit a month ago after 11 years of working there, but I now do video editing full time. But we used to use surveying instruments, and the surveying instruments were would measure pretty accurately. Sometimes we would have things that would measure, a digital level would measure between 1/10 of a millimeter in height differential, very accurate. And we have to set out shopping centers. So just a basic 1-story or a 2-story shopping center, usually 1 story, within 1 or 2 mils. And we, and over the course of a laser, with your Pythagoras's triangle of the backside and the long side, you're getting I think if you're out on your backside by 1 or 2 seconds, you're out by I think it's it's been a while and I'm a bit drunk now, but about 2 millimeters or something. I was 1 millimeter over 200 meters or something. And I just remember hearing my friends say, we have no instruments in the world that could make a pyramid as accurate as the pyramid, lay out the foundations. And I was and I looked it up and I was dude, it's 2 feet out. It's something like 2 feet. I'm that would be torn down. You couldn't even have that in that's so inaccurate for a shopping center. Not even talking about a big building so it's just misinformation just gets out there really easily.
And I think this is something that I guess it's part of what we basically call Orientalism in scholarship. So it's this kind of it's a result of this Western idea that anybody else that ever did anything well must have had help from the outside. So like, I mean, it's like there's just no way that the Egyptians could have built these pyramids. And so we say like it's just impossible. Instead of saying it's amazing, they say it's impossible. It's like stupid. Like they must be aliens because it would have been so hard. And I mean, but I just think we don't give ancient peoples enough credit, and we generally don't give non-industrialized peoples credit for much, right? And so just forgetting that the world was not industrialized until a couple centuries ago, but we just have this idea that these great wonders are impossible. But they're not impossible. They're just amazing. And so it's something about like the being able to look at those things, look at the pyramids and say like, wow, like there are things that are possible with ingenuity and lots of manpower and commitment, right? And those things, I mean, surely we wouldn't build those with manual labor today. But obviously they did, and I'm the kind of person who's much more interested in talking about things as that are right. I mean, they are built. The pyramids are there, like that. It's cool, like yeah. And like you say, then when we don't give in to this idea that they're perfect to the 10th of a millimeter. Like,
I'm not judging them for back then. I'm just saying, like,
but that's what people say, because people will say that like they're perfectly in line, and then they'll leave out the fact that they're not.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly. Or like even the thing with like lining up with True North or something, or along one of the lateral lines, whatever. It's like, yeah, but within a meter. Like that's like, or within 5 meters or something. It was
like these things, and these when they plot these pyramids across the whole Earth, like it's within like 700 kilometers. Like it's not like they're all like dead on a line. They're like, and then you remember, where did people survive in ancient times? Like where could you live? You could live where it didn't get cold. Like, I mean, it was just like, it took a long time to be able to navigate like building big society outside that pretty narrow belt where things stay warm. It's just like there's something about the tropics that you survive better when you have access to a lot of water, and you have basically not freezing temperatures. So not Norway. Like the reason why I mean, like the Stone Age in Norway goes like, several thousand years later than the Stone Age in the Middle East, because like people just didn't like, you didn't build civilization up here. Like every winter, everyone would have just died. Like it took a long time to develop the technologies and the willpower to survive it. So
it actually, what you said there is quite interesting. Like there's that bias that happens with like, they must have had outside help, and Megan Lewis actually researched this. Dr. Josh's wife, cereologist, she said that it actually, there's a lot of racism that goes on in this initially, but to think back when the pyramids were built, or when Mesopotamia was in its prime, I will say, or like, when what we're talking about was happening, the people who were writing these stories, for one, they're not going, this is the holy, like they're not going like thinking, they're not thinking 2,000 years in the 3,000 years in the future. They're thinking they're like the main character of a story. Like they're their own main character. Like they've got their whole lives ahead of them, or maybe they're at the end of their lives, but they're like, they don't see themselves as we see them, which is like the term NPC, like non-playable character, or like a side, and like I was talking to my little brother the other day, and he was saying that he has a friend who he met in Japan when he was living there, who is just since then has just been traveling the world and just living their best life. And every time he sees their stories or talks to them, he says he feels like a side character in their story. Like he just realizes how little he's accomplished. And it was a joke, but it was interesting how it's like everyone does see themselves as like the main character and like taking on the world, and like you forget that the people, like we see the Bible and this literature as like how it affects us and why it's important to us, and we blast it with all of this like context for what it means to us, where the person writing it may have been an interesting tradition, it may have been a religious text that but it was important to them and they were the main character and they're like kind of dead and gone. Like it's just interesting to kind of get yourself out of your own head and kind of see that, like to even try to comprehend that other people exist and other, you know, and they can think and do things, you know. It's
yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's it's there, like the way, it's just funny because it's the way we conceptualize religious texts or truthful texts as opposed to fiction or something else, right? So we have this idea that there's that the literature that was produced was there to be holy or something like that, and like, so one of the positive things that came out of my past, my former self, was that after we came back from living in Mali and having learned this the Fulani language, I discovered that I had been incredibly racist in being there. Like that institutionalized racism was so much a part of the fact that I was there to translate the Bible for these people, right? And it was a horrible realization for me to kind of wake up and just say, like, wait a minute, what gives me the authority to go to a people and say, forget everything you know and listen to my story about what's real. And so it was horrible for me when, like, that was one of the, I think that was one of the biggest things I had to deal with, that started my kind of process of deconstructing or atheism and isming, as it were. But I was really lucky. So actually, it ties back into something I was talking about earlier. This Sumerian Akkadian seminar that I went to in Oslo. So after I came back, when I came back from Mali, I went back to that group, because these were really nice people and they were still alive. so we got to hang out and we're reading Akkadian texts. And one of the professors, Jens Brorvik, who's a Norwegian history of religions professor, who is like, is one of the people that I just don't, I cannot fathom how he can remember so many symbols. Like, I mean, he does like, you know, Chinese, and he does Tibetan, and does you know, all these Indian languages and Sanskrit and Akkadian and Sumerian. But anyway, so he was part of this, and he said to me when I came back, he said, "Oh, well, did you did the Fulanis, do they have any you know, good religious texts? Because we have this book series, the Sacred Scriptures of the World, that if you've got something, we could publish it." And I was like, I don't even know. Like, and that blew me away. Like, that ruined me. I was dead inside, because like in that setting, I thought I was an academic, you know?
Yeah.
Operated as an academic. And in my other part of my life, I was this religious fanatic. And then, like, it hit me like, dang, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I have no understanding. Like, and so I started reading, and like, I found this massive, rich literature of religious and both religious and mythological and just a literature that I had never known about. And so I translated one of the texts into Norwegian, with some creation stories, and then one of the epics into Norwegian for this series. And so it was like, that for me was so cathartic. It was like so important for like realize, like transitioning out of being like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person, to be like, well, I was a pretty horrible person, but at least now I can turn it around a little. And
there is this. Sorry, keep going.
No, go on.
I was gonna say there is like this smugness of like, walking around telling people like we've got the answer to this, like we've got the answer to your religious but one of the things that really hit home for me was I was watching a Vice documentary back in the day when Vice was cool. It was I think it was Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. It was like about like psychedelics and things like that.
Yeah.
But it was talking about how there was interviewing this anthropologist or someone who was interested in like African religion and African people, and he kind of mentioned just like flippantly that like voodoo is just part of African. It was just part of African religion. Some African religions. It's not. It's got this negative connotation, and almost everything that you watch Big Bang Theory, and they say, Penny says, "Oh, you don't want to mess with voodoo," and voodoo is like, but really, like voodoo was a religious practice. It wasn't about like the stabbing the needles in the doll. That's not all it is. There's more to it, but that was the religious expression for some communities on the continent of Africa, probably in only 1 or 2 countries, or I don't know enough about it, but that understanding that like, damn, I've viewed this like one thing as like black, like literally black magic, like it's like this evil, horrible thing, when I didn't even consider, like, imagine if there were like voodoo missionaries like walking around like suburbia and like Seattle,
Right.
like like telling you like, hey, by the way, like we've got like there'd be like in some places in the US it would be like a war zone, or some places anywhere around the world it'd be a horrible thing. It'd be like a bad,
Yep.
But yeah,
that's such a good point, like for so many reasons. But like, I mean, the last thing you said, like, I mean, America prides itself on having freedom of religion, but like, can you imagine if every religion came and missionized, like evangelized for their religion openly, publicly, all over the place, like made it a real marketplace of religions? Like, I mean, very quickly there would no longer be freedom of religion.
Yeah. In Allah we trust on the dollar bill or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really funny because one of the things that it just really brought up a memory of, like, one of the things we were told when we moved to Mali was that we shouldn't cut our hair when we're there because people would collect it and use it.
Oh no.
Yeah. And that's such a weird thing because, like, on the one hand, it's affirming the power of voodoo, like that, and I mean, it's like accepting that there's something in your hair that would have some kind of power, so you need to be careful. But at the same time, like, obviously we're going there to say your stuff has no power. And so it's like such a weird thing. But that means it just kind of shows that what we think of as voodoo, like you would say, like, oh, it's magic or whatever. But like basically what it's saying is that your essence is in your body, and all the parts of your body that fall off, your nails, your hair and whatever, like, then there's some essence of you in that. And by getting a part of that, then you have some power over the whole. And that's actually really interesting.
It is, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's the whiskey or whatever's happening, but I'm getting like memories. Like, I remember when I lost the job as a youth pastor, I got really depressed, and it's part of my spiral downhill. I'm actually going to tell my story on Derek's channel soon, but go into more depth. But I started smoking weed for the first time in my life when I was like 20, and my roommate introduced it to me, and I was smoking all the time. And this girl that I was kind of flirting with at the time was like, "Let's go watch Hostel. It's like a horror movie." And I was like, "No." And I remember thinking to myself, I remember saying like, I don't know if I said it, but I was like, oh, I don't watch horror movies. But I remember thinking to myself, like, no, I don't want to let the evil spirits in.
The devil
I'm
in,
happy. Like, let's just chill here in the garage and smoke weed. I don't want any of that. You know, like it was such this like self-righteous, like the or even Pokemon. Like I was told Pokemon was evil, right? And I remember like when I had started walking away, like trying to like refigure out my Christianity after everything happened, I was like, I'm gonna watch Pokemon and I'm gonna look for this evil that's in Pokemon. And funny enough, this all ties into what we're talking about. I remember, like, I think it was like 7 or 8 episodes in. I'm 25 years old, rewatching a show from my childhood, like Pokemon, right? And I'm watching it, and or I was 22 or something, and it's so funny. I'm looking for the evil. I'm like waiting for the evil. I'm like, maybe it's the psychic Pokemon. Maybe that's the evil. Maybe it's the. And I'm watching it because everyone at church told me it's evil. And then they're stuck out on this raft, and they're like, oh, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna find land? And then Brock says to Ash, one of the characters, and says, hey, what about the story of Noah? Noah actually sent out a, blah, blah, blah. And then Ash goes, yeah, let's be like Noah. And he throws his like bird Pokemon out, and his bird Pokemon goes and finds land. And I was like, damn, like this is teaching kids Bible stories and this is evil. Like it was just, it was, and people would say, oh, the devil works in mysterious ways or whatever. But it is interesting how you have those presuppositions about different beliefs and ideas and things like that.
And that kind of brings us to like my like what literally is like what's really on my mind these days, and what I'm trying to express is that those things don't show up randomly. Like the fact that you thought that Pokemon was evil is not because you read Pokemon or watched Pokemon or looked at the cards and thought, oh man, look at that evil Pokemon. Like it's because somebody told you that, or because that was said in your presence, and because it was an assumption within the community of your values. And this is something that's super important when we're talking about like the idea of religious texts, is that things become important. They become religious, they become authoritative through communities that define them as such. And so like saying that Pokemon is evil is a way of like is a way of defining something, but that only happens when people actually exert authority on others, right? And I mean, humans, we absorb so much of what goes on around us, and I think like sometimes we forget that, like how susceptible we are of picking up the things that are said or talked about, or that we read or we watch on TV, or even things that are part of the Big Bang Theory or part of whatever, we process so much. And that is what the idea of, I guess we would call it like the sociology of religion, where we are not alone. Like it's not me and a text making a decision, but it's me and everything I've ever experienced with anyone ever. Right? And so it's not just you saying, oh, Pokemon, but it's like you saying my upbringing. Right?
Yeah.
And it's Harry Potter, and it's Lord of the Rings, and it's horror films, and it's all kinds of stuff that we were told both explicitly and implicitly that we would go to hell if we got involved with, right? Because that was the implication in basically everything. It was like, oh no, you don't want to learn to dance. You want to be awkward until you're 90 years old because that is bad and the devil will get you. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's just so many things that are so ridiculous, but when the communities around you agree that those are things that we're going to shy away from, or we're going to say are bad, or that we're going to say are great and amazing and the best things ever, that's what we really feel. and like, and
Yeah.
those are real feelings, because that's what our body reacts to, is saying, like, you walk into a room and you see a bunch of Pokemon cards. If you're indoctrinated into that, you're going to be like, oh, evil is in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's like, well, they're like tarot cards. They talk about evolution, in
Yes.
Pokemon. They have ghost Pokemon and psychic Pokemon, and it's also funny enough. It actually draws on a lot of Shinto. There's a bit of Shinto in there as well. So, just I have another random aside on this, talking about random things in the past. But when I was a really strong Christian, I bought. Do you don't play video games, do you? I imagine.
So I have played video games in my life. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do you play? I imagine, like, you probably live a more active lifestyle, based on the stories I hear about you running through the desert and stuff. But
I basically stopped at World of Warcraft. Like, that's
Oh,
my evolution.
okay.
I made it that
Okay.
far. But then,
So,
I changed. Yeah.
okay. So Elder Scrolls. Do you know Elder Scrolls, like Oblivion? So I bought the expansion to Oblivion, Shivering Isles, and it's very, like, ominous and this. But in the game, it had like magic. Obviously, you could play a magic character as an RPG, and you do magic. And two things. One of my friends said, "Oh, you stay away from doing anything with magic, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, well." I was like, "Well, I got to kind of revive my health by using magic." So I was like, kind of like, I only use, and I was like, I don't really, but, and then another thing, a friend from work who was this like Christian lady who I would spend days packing shelves with at a supermarket, and we'd talk about the Bible the whole time. I told her about this, and she said, "Do you know friendship with the world means you're enemies to God?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh," and she goes, you need to destroy it. So I went home and I snapped that disc. It cost me $50 of my pocket money, and snapped it, threw it in the bin. And I heard God say to me, "You just did something out of religion." And I was like, "Oh," So it was like, I didn't even get like the satisfaction of it, because I did something out of religious, But anyway, later on, I found out this lady, Paul, she fell for a scam, like, husband in Africa, and she, like, literally sent him hundreds of thousands of dollars and moved there. But it was her second husband, and I said to her, I was like, "Hey, doesn't," because we talk about these things all day at work. I said, "Doesn't the Bible say that, like, you aren't to get divorced?" Like, and I was trying to understand. I was a new Christian, 16 years old, and she said no. And she turns to me and she goes, "No." She says, "No, because on the cross, Jesus said, 'It is finished.'" And I went, and I was like, "What about my wait, what? So you can do whatever you want, but, like, I can't play video games because, like, Jesus didn't finish it for me? Like, what do you mean?" Like, I just remember, like, she kind of rebukes me in that moment, like, and I was like, "Okay," like, and I just kind of, like, went back to packing my shelves and stuff. But it's just interesting how it was fine for her to remarry, get divorced and remarry, but for me, I wasn't allowed to play video games. Anyway,
but again, like, I mean, so just kind of thinking about that makes me think about the way we think about rules and regulations and laws, because it's just so random, right? What is actually in the Bible and not, or it seems to me like there are so many things that are mentioned in ancient literature, and then there's like a selection of those things end up in the Bible. Like, there's so much. Yeah, go on.
Well, I was going to ask, can we? So we've kind of gone on like a random drunken, rant, but I'm okay with that. But I do want to talk a little bit about, like, so there are, like, things like the law codes, the Code of Hammurabi, and can you talk more about, like, the Mesopotamian influence on the Bible?
Yeah. So I mean, and honestly, this is probably like this was one of the most formative things that I dealt with through my studies, was the law codes, because I actually I wrote my thesis, my master's thesis in Old Testament studies, on a comparison of the laws of Hammurabi and the laws in Exodus 21 to 24. And I picked out a couple of examples that like are so obvious, like that there's no question that the law codes in Genesis know about the ancient Near Eastern law codes.
Well, do you have those references handy? I'm looking up the Code of Hammurabi in Genesis, and the first result is Answers in Genesis, and the title is Hammurabi or Moses, Who is the Authority? so,
oh my God.
Yeah,
That is so funny. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna find something here, and I'm gonna share it with you. Or well, wait, just give me a second, because things operate slower after a few drinks. So I threw together a few slides to there we go. So now, if you let me show this, I'll just jump to it.
I will, but I just want to say that when I was on with Kip once, we had like a 3-hour podcast drinking straight whiskey. Go to the start and go to the end, and you just see the difference.
I watched the whole thing.
Yeah,
I had to keep turning up the speed of which I was.
So it's like 1.25, 1.5.
Because at some point, like Kip just stopped talking in coherent sentences and would just be like, I think, and it was just it was so slow. It was just crazy.
Oh, that's the magic. Hey, only on deep drinks. That's the magic. And it's funny because each video I have to like go back through and ask someone to manually review it, because I think they like pick up that we're drunk or something and manually review it for like AdSense revenue. Cool.
So this is the one that is like so I mean, in any lecture any lecture that I had that I've had on the ancient Near Eastern law codes and stuff, I always use this. So this is like this I would do it at university. But so this is the laws of Eshnunna, which is older than the laws of Hammurabi. So I keep this in here to show that we have basically three good witnesses for it. But anyway, I'm confusing myself because of the Jameson. Anyway, so just read the text. So it says that if an ox gores another ox and causes its death, both ox owners shall divide among themselves the price of the live ox and also the meat of the dead ox. So this is a law that's saying if you have a bull, let's call it a bull because it's easier to understand. A bull goes and kills another bull. What you do is you sell the meat from the dead bull, and you take the value of the live bull, and then that you have to split that value between the two. So the owner of the live bull is going to have more money because a live bull is more than a dead bull, and he has to pay kind of the difference to the dead guy's bull, right? Okay. And the next law, 54 in the laws of Eshnunna, is if an ox is known to gore habitually, and the authorities have brought the fact to the knowledge of its owner, but he hasn't done anything with it, so he hasn't dehorned his ox, and it gores a man and causes his death, the owner shall pay 2/3 of a mina of silver. Okay, so what we need to know about the language here is that when it says a man, what it means is a tax-paying local man. It's like you're part of society. You're not a slave. You're not a woman. You're not excluded from fellowship. So if an ox kills an important person, a landowner, we could call it in Greek society, it would be, then you have to pay 2/3 a mina of silver. But if it's a slave, then it's only 15 shekels of silver. It's like a 10th of or a 40th of or something like that. And sorry, I'm losing my ability to think through exactly the numbers. But so what we have is 3 laws here. 1, ox causes a death of another ox. They divide it up. 2, if you kill a person who is an esteemed member of society, they get a large amount of money that they pay. And then if it's a slave, it's less. Hammurabi has a very similar thing. It starts with if an ox gores a man to death while it's passing through the streets, no big deal. So if you kill somebody randomly if an ox just randomly kills somebody, no big deal. But if he's a known gorer, it's such a weird word, isn't it? Gorer.
Known gorer, yeah.
He's a known gorer, and the authorities of his city quarter, so his local authorities, notify him that it is a known gorer, but he doesn't blunt the horns. So cut off the tips, I guess, or whatever. Yeah. Put some cotton swabs on the end.
There's a construction site like red,
yellow flags or whatever.
Yeah.
Ox gores to death a member of the Awilo class, and this is where, so the translation, this is basically trying to make you understand that if you were high society, if a high society person is killed, it's 30 shekels of silver. But if it's somebody's slave, then it's 20 shekels of silver. So let's look at the Bible. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, and the ox shall be stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. That's exactly like we saw in Hammurabi.
And just to be clear, this is later.
This is the Bible.
Yeah, but like later, right?
So
Bible.
Right. It's the southern Monger is coming out.
Yeah.
But so what yeah. And so I mean that would be the interpretation. I mean, the way I would read it is that this is a development of the same law into a new context as a later understanding of it within the Israelite context. Right? And so you have the same thing that if it's somebody, if it kills a man or a woman, the ox has to be killed and the owner is not liable. But what we have is a development in the Israelite understanding is that the flesh shall not be eaten. So finding it as impure because it killed somebody. So we have a development here. And that's why I would think it would be later.
Okay.
So it's changing what we think of it, but the basic structure of it is the same. That we have kill somebody randomly. If it's an ox, it's not that big a deal. But let's go ahead and just say that don't eat it, kill the ox, but you don't have to pay a fine. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore, if it's usually goring people, and its owner has been warned by the city council, but hasn't restrained it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned and his owner shall be put to death. What?
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. That's Exodus 21 in the Bible.
Man, Exodus 21 does so much heavy lifting for like atheist commentators on the Bible. Like, it's got the slavery passages, it's got the putting to death. It's I never knew of Exodus 21. Like, I never sunk it in until I watched the Atheist Experience with Matt Dillahunty quoted. But yeah, it's it's wild chapter.
This is for me one of the cornerstones of how obvious it is that the Bible was written in stages. because when you look at Exodus 21 to 24, and then you look at you look at Leviticus and you look at Deuteronomy, you see that there are definite changes in these laws, developments in these laws over time. Like there's no question. But anyways, let's stick to the point. So, and then we have this kind of aside that if a ransom person is imposed on the owner and their owner should pay, blah, 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 it's just kind of this random Israelite law. But then we go to verse 31. It says, if it gores a boy or a girl, the owner shall be dealt with according to this same rule. So what it's saying is that when we talk about a man or a woman, we don't mean just any man or a woman. And so what's really interesting with this passage is it's telling us about the hierarchical structures. So it's saying that there is, if you're a son of a wealthy landowner person or a daughter of a wealthy landowner person, then you're worth more than the slave that we're going to get to in the next verse.
Yeah, it's interesting because this goes back to what you're saying about like reading the text slowly. Like reading it slowly, you reading it fast, you just blaze right over that. Oh yeah, it makes sense. But like, why was this mentioned? So are you saying that I missed your? I looked at my notes for it, but there was that class of people it said before. Is that kind of what this is doing? It's saying like, hey, this is kind of like nudge, nudge, wink, wink. The class of the people we're talking about, but then it's like, oh, I better mention both boys and girls. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah. Okay. And so, I mean, my way of understanding this text is that it's just specifying that there are not only the landowners as a class, but they're also their wives, which then shows up in verse 29, a man or a woman. And it also shows up then in 31, where it says a boy or girl, which means that the son or a daughter of a landowner, so of an Israelite in this context. So it's like, if you're a real Israelite, man or woman or boy or girl, then the owner of the bull will be put to death if they get killed. But then we look at verse 22 and 32, sorry. It says, if the ox gores a male or female slave, the owner shall pay to the slave owner 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So if it's a slave, it's not worth the same as a free person.
Right.
Because, and I mean, so we can give a shout out to Josh and Digital Hammurabi's new publication, which is the second edition of the slavery in the I don't remember the name of the volume. Sorry, the slavery in the Bible.
It's called Does the Bible endorse slavery? But let me just share my screen quickly.
Yep.
Coming up, we actually have him coming on to talk about it. But I just really want everyone to appreciate the clickbait that I used here. Like, tell me this is amazing.
So is he drinking? What's he drinking?
It's coffee. It's just coffee.
Iced coffee.
Okay. Well, I chose iced coffee because that's what I'm drinking, and it looked better than just like a cup of coffee. But he's just said coffee.
He could have Irish.
I just want everyone to see Book of Slavery and Genocide, and it's got someone holding the Bible so happily, just like, my favorite book. But it's clever because we're talking about his book on slavery and genocide, but also the book. The Bible, but also his book is commentary on the Bible, which has slavery and genocide. So I just needed to I feel like I've got a marketing degree. I feel like sometimes my skills don't get through to everyone, and I just need to promote them when I can. But yes, he's got a second book coming.
Well done. But yeah, but that's that's, I mean, that's laying implicitly in what we're talking about now, is that the Israelites have their own law code in the Bible, which is modifying and adapting, but also quoting verbatim the laws of ancient Sumeria and Babylonia.
So,
and so what happens here, what we see here is that yes, it's changed, but it's so hard for me to imagine a context where we have this development and this transmission of laws which are basically identical with local variations that don't know about each other.
It's a miracle.
Right. And sure, divine inspiration. But what we see is that yes, they are products of real good Israelite thinkers who adapted and developed the law to fit their context, the way they thought about justice, the way they thought about righteousness, the way they thought about things. But doesn't mean that they didn't pick it up from other sources.
Well, that's a fantastic explanation for why we see this, and it makes total sense to me. How do you think? Like, do you know of how people who maybe have this like a fundamentalist, like Ken Ham perspective, that the Bible is the imperfect inherent word of God? It came, it came from like this dropped from heaven, in English, perhaps, but it dropped from heaven in this perfect form. Like, how do you think people can rectify this? Do they cry conspiracy like they do with evolution, or do they? What do they do? Like, how does someone, or do they say like maybe God inspired these older texts, or maybe the devil plant? I've heard that the devil plants fossils to confuse scientists so that we reject the salvation of Jesus. But like,
it happens all the time.
Yeah. So like, how would, like, if you had to put your mind into a fundamentalist, how would you get around this? Like, knowing what you know.
Oh, well, no, it's really easy because you say that this happened and then everyone else has copied it. And
okay.
It's just reversing all evidence that we have in the physical world. Because all you have to do is say that it might not be there, but we know that it's true. Right. And this is the way you deal with that kind of evidence when you're in that aim. I mean, I would call it more apologetic than the fundamentalist, because I know so many fundamentalists that don't think about these things at all, that are just a part of the context that they're in, and that's what it is. But it's the apologists that really get into the dirty details of it. And I think there's something to be said for that understanding, or that I guess that dichotomy, that difference between what I'm trying to say and what they would say, is that what I see is that when we have these things in existence 1,500 years before all the others, and long traditions of transmitting it, long before Hebrew was even a language, like it's shocking that in Hebrew we have a law or a series of laws that fit so well with what was there thousands of years before. Unless we assume the opposite situation, that these laws were important for the whole region for a long period of time. And then, it makes perfect sense. So I don't have a ton of books. I like to sit in front of blank walls and stuff, but one book I bought that has like literally been so important for me is this one. So I might be I might be upside down, but it's called
Inventing God's Law.
Inventing God's Law. So it's a guy named David Wright who has studied the laws in Exodus 21 to 24 and seen that basically what we have is a very clear structure that follows the laws of Hammurabi.
So is he like the go-to on this? Like,
yeah, this is such a good book.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat there. People can there's links.
Yeah, and he does. He cites all the relevant literature and all the laws, and what's really, and I mean, what's great is that already in his introduction, he shows you that basically the structure is like if the Exodus follows Hammurabi, like here, and then there's something that out of order, but then here, and then something out of order, and then here, and like it's not only that we have the laws are similar, like if an ox kills somebody, it's okay, but if he kills a slave, you got to pay for it. It's like it's that the ordering of the laws from the code of Hammurabi, the laws of Hammurabi also are this basically the same as this part of Exodus.
So yeah, it'd be a wild miracle from baby Jesus if that actually happened,
right? And so like when you look at these things as literature that appears in the context of the real world, it's not difficult to talk about because things exist and people are exposed to those things and that affects them and they make new things based on that knowledge. It's not difficult in a real world assessment of literature. It's like Shakespeare. I mean, like Shakespeare obviously had read things, and there's hundreds, there's thousands of books written on what made Shakespeare do what he did, right? But when you apply the same standards to the biblical literature, what happens is that people say, surely they didn't use those sources. And
because ours is the perfect word of God, right?
Right. And that's the difference, is that you're applying a different standard to it.
Well, something I sent you a private chat message. If you could just have a look at that while I shout out your channel. So your channel, you haven't done a huge amount on it recently because you've just been incredibly busy. But as you can see, this isn't me watching, only getting like a little bit in and then stopping. I think a lot of this is me watching a second time. But the Bible was written backwards is an amazing is an amazing channel. And if you're interested in anything that we talk about here, go over and subscribe. Pragmatic Crystal put the link in the chat just before, so you can go check that out as well. You have a website and you're doing some really cool stuff. There's some awesome stuff that's coming out. You're super busy at the moment. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing and what your plans are? Actually, I was saving the super chats for the end, but there's someone who, Joshua Clark, elephant in the room. When are we getting more Bible Monger vids?
Yeah. So thank you. Good question. Good super chat.
Thank you for the super chat.
The $1 million question, I would say, not the $10 question, but good enough. No, it'll be along. So I mean, I apologize to everyone out there who would love to see more stuff, but I've been swamped. So it's just, so this week, I'll talk about this week. I'm working on revising a chapter for a book that I should have submitted in May, and so I'm that far, I feel like I'm that far behind. I'm working overtime to get stuff done. And so basically what's been going on after Easter, I've been going to conferences. So I did 2 big conferences this year. I was in the US at Yale University for the North American Syriac Society. So that is probably one of the most like niche places you can show up in scholarship. But so Syriac is the language of the dialect of Aramaic that develops in Edessa in Syria in the period of so after Jesus. It's kind of like a development of Aramaic after the time of Jesus, and it's a more or less a Christian dialect. But so one of the things that I do is the reception history of biblical ideas and concepts that pass through Syriac texts. And so one of the things then that I'm really interested in is names that are given to women in literature, like that are in biblical literature. So there's so many women in the Bible that aren't given names, right? And some of them are these in the first chapters of Genesis, where the names of the daughters of Adam and Eve and the wives of like Seth and Enosh and Methuselah and Enoch and Noah and all these guys, the wives are never named. And the Bible just says, and this is where this is like, I would say if there's one reason why you should learn Hebrew, it's so that you can understand how random it is the way these wives are not mentioned in the Bible. Because there's like in Hebrew, you can like make these weird constructions where you can make something happen without being part of it. And that's like basically what happens in the birthing of these children. Like, that Adam makes Seth get born and Seth makes Enosh get born. And like there's a way of removing the woman from the context. So anyway, so I did a paper at Yale on the names of the wives. Oh no, sorry, the names of the daughters of Adam and Eve that are given in a Syriac text from the like the end of the 5th, early 6th century. And then the way those get picked up in all these crazy, weird contexts in Bibles that are composed in French, English, Dutch, German, and even like Old Norse and Icelandic and stuff like that. So I traced those. And that's one of the things I really think is interesting, like the way people just continue developing stories. And so that's like part of what makes me so interested in the oldest stuff, like all this Akkadian, Sumerian, all that kind of stuff, is that it makes so much sense to just continue the line of thinking.
Yeah, it's like people are rooted in their culture and the ideas that surround them. Which actually, I've got a provocative question for you. That's very off topic, but it's not very off topic. It's a little off topic, but I want to get your thoughts on it at this level of intoxication. Thank you again for the super chat, Joshua. But before I do that, I just want to quickly, before I forget, because I'm going to forget, I guarantee. I mentioned the upcoming guest we have on Deep Drinks, which is really cool. Nuri Khan, Neela 604 Atheist, but a lot of people were confused. So I've been releasing some videos behind a Patreon and membership that are just that are interviews that are not available to everyone. So I just wanted to explain them quickly. So I've got these 2 little clips, the origins of Judaism and Jesus within Judaism. They're like 30-minute song and 18-minute song. They're part of a long interview I recorded with Dr. Kip Davis. they're just raw behind the scenes interviews that if you want to see, you can join the Patreon or become a channel member. It's also on, let me share this tab instead. It's also channel videos down here if you want to. Any tier will get you access. I'm releasing them now, but they will eventually be a full part of a full documentary that I will be available to everyone. So I just wanted to make that known that like Deep Drinks isn't going like a paid service or anything like that. It's they're just behind the scenes interviews. But if you want to check them out, join the Patreon and or become a channel member. So the provocative question: what do you think of Greek mimesis in the Gospels?
Oh, so I'm. That's a really good question, and I would say it's a natural continuation of what I do.
Okay.
So, the problem is when I'm I don't know, a quarter of a way into a liter of Jameson, as it looks like.
Yeah, like sorry, but like to show you like that's gone. Like it's all gone. Like
you're slacking. Look at mine.
Whoa. Okay.
Oh, come on, Deep Drinks, catch up.
Wait, hang on. How full is your glass? Okay. All right. Well, I've got like a little.
Yeah, you're slacking. Come on, man.
Okay, I'll get some. All right, I do this a lot, man.
Yeah, but you forget I'm from the South. I know. I mean, I've been working like seriously for like 5 or 6 weeks. I've been thinking about this day. I've been building up to it.
Well, I hope I don't disappoint.
Like
that's come on.
I still feel like I've got you.
Yeah, you got me. Yeah, okay, all right.
Anyway, but so in like within the next year or two, I hope to finish a book that I'm working on, which is also the name of my channel, which is The Bible is Written Backwards. So that's what I'm working on, or one of the things I'm working on, and the natural continuation of of what I've been doing is that the second half of that book is the mimesis, or is the New Testament that's also receiving the earlier traditions. So we start with the stuff where the Old Testament is clearly reinventing, rewriting, receiving older ideas and making them their own. And for me, that is just obvious, right? And I think that's pretty much the consensus in scholarship, except in the evangelical fundamentalist communities.
Yeah. But they also believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. So what are you going to do?
Right. So what are you going to do? But so and when you then keep working your way forward, what you see is that there is no question that the New Testament is receiving the Old Testament and rewriting and redefining it. But then when you weave in the Greek material, then that's when it all makes sense.
Yeah, and it gets, yeah. You know, we had Dr. Dennis R. McDonald on the channel, and he said, you know, what did he say? Brain work. He said the Iliad and the Odyssey. Plato. Homer. There's a quote. It's like Homer is the air the Greeks breathed. It was like it was like so part of their culture.
Yeah.
I think that if you were to look at Dennis R. McDonald's work, especially like if you were to look at some of like the analogies that he draws in his book, The Synopsis of Epic, and you look at like the story of like the fisherman or the Sea of Galilee, like all that stuff, you can there's a very good case to be made. I think he makes a good case for that. They're literally just like, they're not real stories. They're kind of, or there may be parts of the Gospels were complete adaptations from these Greek epics. However, I think that even if that doesn't get across the board, I think that's what's undeniable is this kind of idea that, well, it just seems to make sense that if Kip's in the chat. If
what up, Kip?
Hello, Kip. We're very drunk. Show him the bottle. You got to show the bottle of how much you've had. But the idea is that we, they were so rooted in Greek thought. Oh no! Oh no! I hope you're not sick, man. I hope you're okay. But you're rooted in Greek thought and Greek ideas that like parts just get pushed into it, which for me, I honestly, and I don't know how you feel about this, but when I deconstructed my faith and I started looking at these religious texts as like humanity's earliest attempts to try and understand the cosmos, to try and piece together society, to try and tell stories that brought people together, that it became incredibly beautiful, and it made so much more sense. Like when you look at Genesis, like you're saying, as it's either a polemic or not just a polemic, but like a retelling of the story of of being rooted in that civilization. It makes sense, and it makes sense why like we're saying the Buddha has reincarnation. It makes sense. Like it all just makes sense, but it's also kind of this like it is I guess there's like, I'm being honest, like there's a hint of is it not? It's not patronizing, but it's like not looking down on, but like I guess what we're talking about before about like looking at old cultures, like, oh, how cute and how small their world was. They thought stars were certain things, and now we can see billions of years away. But there's a bit of that where it's like it's kind of beautiful. It's like humanity's first steps at trying to like organize civilization, to try and build this cosmology to understand their place and purpose in the universe. And when you look at it like that, and you talked about this before, and maybe we could touch it again, but like looking at the difference between literature and like holy text, like spawned down from above, like it's just that difference.
Yeah, well, and that's what I think is like I don't know, it's the most shocking change for me, is that when you look at things from a, I don't know, I don't want to call it scientific perspective, but at least from a rigorous, I don't know, objective, scientific might be the best. I don't know what the best word is at this point.
Naturalistic, or like
just at a realize. I mean, if you look at things from a literary perspective, let's just talk about
that's good. That's a good word.
Okay, let's talk about what I know. So what I see is that it's just when you work with any kind of literature and you talk about what the way things are and the way things affect each other, and especially if you apply modern sociological perspectives on things, there is just so much to be gained in comparison to let's hope that the wind is blowing the right direction theological perspective. It's just so shocking that what we would think would be right would be to say we have one correct interpretation and we have to try and find ways to defend it.
Yeah, it's like cart for the horse kind of thing.
Exactly. And so when we look at things as we do with any kind of literature, and we say, why would a later text look very much like an earlier text? It's very easy when you're into the history of literature. It's very hard when you're into Christian theology. And so it's just like, for me, there's so much to be said for rethinking what is valuable, what is defining the perspectives that we choose. And again, it's like, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, that like, of course, people who are told that if you don't choose God, you're going to hell, then you can't choose to reflect on the comparisons and the results of actual detailed historical analyses done by professional scholars. And so you're stuck. But what I think is really important is that we take time to think, like, what is the value of what we do? And so for me as a scholar, it's so important that when we read things, that we're able to say that, like, the end game isn't to change or ruin anybody's life. Like, all I'm interested in is like, what's there? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm interested.
Well, yeah. It's like a intellectual pursuit rather than a defense, or like getting on your back feet. It's very true.
Yeah,
There's
exactly. Like, because I think this is something that does get lost in a lot of what we talk about. That I honestly think that when things change, when we get new information, I want to learn it. I want to take that in and make me adapt to the new information. Like, and that for me, like, I mean, personally, I don't think what we do in the humanities is exactly the same as what natural sciences do. So I wish, like, I have a really good friend. He's Australian.
Is it me?
No. Well, you are a friend who's Australian. I have another really good friend who's Australian. Who lives in Melbourne. And
okay, I was born there.
Oh, good. And he lives in Warrandyte, like up.
I don't know that area.
So it's just kind of up the Yarra River, and so he lived in Norway for a couple of years and was our neighbor. So we split a house. We lived downstairs and they lived upstairs, and so we got to know them really, really well. And he's in fish. he's a geneticist, but he works with fish genetics, and like the research he does can change, like, whether you feed 100 or 100,000 people, right? And so he's like, it in my later life has been such a role model because he really does make a difference. Like, I feel like there's so much to be learned from the hard sciences that actually do things where we, like in literature, kind of say things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so what I'm saying is that it is meaningful to really reflect on what we have available as evidence.
I agree, Dr. Matthew Monger. Like I'm some equal.
Thank you, drunk.
Thank you. Yeah, you have peer support. Oh God, I can't even speak. you mentioned something before about hell and like the idea of hell. We talked last time about the eternal soul and everything like that, and about how like the Bible doesn't seem to have an eternal soul. In the Old Testament, sorry, in the Old Testament doesn't have an eternal soul. And those ideas developed, and of course, I'm sure your second book will go into where the idea of afterlife came from, especially if you're like looking at mimesis. But one thing I wanted to kind of like touch on is maybe the idea of hell, like maybe the idea of an afterlife. So you talked about how the Mesopotamian texts they're talking about death, that they're trying to not only talking about death, but they're trying to explain death in the epic of Gilgamesh and or maybe the Enumerated. I can't remember. This was an hour and a half ago now, but and many whiskeys later. But yeah, can you talk a little bit about like how the idea of death and dealing with death and Sheol and then eventually hell kind of develops over time?
That's a lot. That's a lot to ask at this point in the show.
Well, what I will say, well, maybe we can simplify it, because what I will say is, for me, I'm writing. Well, I'm putting together a little piece of content. It's nothing huge, but I'm putting together something that I wish I had when I was deconstructing my faith. Posing questions,
yep.
and one of them, and a big chunk of that is about hell.
Yes,
And the thing that I'm finding, and you can see like hints of what I'm kind of getting at with my questions. If you subscribe to Deep Drinks, you can see like I post a lot of stuff, and it's how do people overcome the fear of hell? And the big thing that people come back to me with is realizing the historical context of where the idea of hell developed.
Yeah.
So you don't need to give us the. You don't need to like recite Dr. Bart Ehrman's book now that you've this much whiskey down. But how did in regards to like how things develop, how do you think the idea of the afterlife developed?
Oh, well, I mean, it's so if I can take a different route into it.
Yeah. We're like at this stage, we're like forward driving, and you're just pointing, and I'll.
Yeah. So what it's not difficult at all to understand that we question what happens to us when we're dead. I think this is probably one of the oldest questions of humanity. What, like, we're here and then we're not. And then the other people that are left behind look at our bodies and say, you look the same for a little bit, and then you disappear. So there's this weird connection between the body and temporality, like like time. And so I really think that part of what is, I think, really what's part of what we're thinking about eternity has to do with that question of where do we go? And so now I'm speaking kind of more as a historian of religions. So we're asking that question of what happens to people when they're gone. And Christianity has a kind of a form that you fill out, like you tick off if you believed, and maybe if you've done the right things.
Yeah.
Like, we're not sure exactly what you need to tick off for. That's why we keep pretending.
So many Christians are scared of like they're not going to make the cut.
Right.
Like,
you're scared. And I've been there. So this is one of the things that also like made such a difference in my life, was understanding that. So my wife is Norwegian, and she grew up with a very different understanding of what would ruin your life like would damn you to hell, as we say.
Mm.
And then what I did, like I thought taking somebody's batteries out of their Discman was a sin, like that was my understanding, whereas she was more like murder someone,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and so there was this massive gap between what was actually bad,
Mm.
even though we agreed that you probably shouldn't do it. But like, and that made it was such a big, like, yeah, it was such a big thing for me to
Mm.
realize that everybody thinks differently about where the lines are between what is okay and what is not so great and what is you're gonna burn for eternity, man. And
Mm.
and so when we look at the development of hell, we like what's really interesting is that hell is not a Jewish concept. Like
Mm.
that's a Christian's concept. Sorry. So
Yeah.
we're stuck with eternity in hell because we're Christians? That doesn't make much
Mm.
sense, does it? And and so if we look at the development also of what hell is, like when we look at the biblical record, so my reading of the biblical record is that hell is death.
Mm.
You're
So
dead.
in the New Testament, you think it's just like,
I think there's very little evidence for the New Testament conceptualizing hell as being anything other than if for individuals, that hell is anything other than you're not with God.
mm.
And I mean, if we look at the biblical record as well, I mean, heaven is singing God's praises for eternity. I don't have
Mm.
a great singing voice.
The difference between heaven and hell doesn't sound that.
There's a very
I mean,
fine line. Well, yeah, but for me, I think the basic problem is the question of whether we think that hell is eternity suffering, which is what the current Christian fundamentalist evangelical understanding of hell is, or whether we think of hell as the end.
Mm.
And that's the basic difference for me between the Jewish and the current Christian or fundamentalist understanding of hell is.
Mm.
And so for part of me, the part of me that grew up in the more evangelical side, I'd say, I don't want to be burned and tortured and suffer for all eternity. I don't want that.
Mm.
But then the part of me that's more scholarly that says like, wait, what did the text actually say? It's like, oh, you're dead. You're gone. See ya. It's like, what is
Mm.
that? And that's only the texts. And then, yeah.
It's weird to like the version of hell that I believed in, like heaven and hell that I believed in, was like that you would die if you repented. You were good and go to heaven. But if you like sinned between the time you repented,
Yeah,
and you would go to hell, and which kind of leaves you in this situation where, like, Ted Bundy killed and ate all those people who was in homosexual relationships with, and I believed homosexuality was a sin, and at the time, and so like, and he repented at the end of his life, in prison. So it's like, so Ted Bundy's in heaven, and all those like innocent gay men are like in hell. Like that was like I would have just shrugged my shoulders and gone like, yeah, that's how serious this gospel is. This, you need to take this seriously. But when I look at it now, I go, that's kind of disgusting. Like,
it's ridiculous. Yeah.
mm,
And that's, but what's super cool about what you just said is that what you're doing is that you're applying texts that you think about from the past to your own context.
mm,
And again, and that's what we do. Like we try to think like, what makes sense to me about these ancient things. And I think that is what is happening really throughout history. That every time these things get brought up, we're thinking, how do we fit into that? How do we make sense in the story?
It's that, like, everyone's the like lead character in their own story kind of thing.
And then if we expand that to say that our people is the lead in that story, right? And so like, I mean, the amazing thing that happens in Christianity is that Paul just happens to be both Christian and Roman. And so let me expand this great thing that I think is true to everyone. I mean, and that goes back to the Greek mimesis criticism that you're talking about, because I really believe that the Greek education, the Greek sociology, the Greek psyche of what we're talking about is so important for understanding why there's a tradition that is pretty much exclusive to Israel. Pretty much, sorry. It's super exclusive to Israel. That's the third bottle of Jameson.
That's a lot. I hope you're.
Cheers, man.
I'll message your I'll find your partner on Facebook or something, and I'll be like, send help. He needs water and hydrolyte. I actually
yeah, go on.
Go. No, go. What were you saying?
No, but I just think like it's so incredibly interesting that what we do is make these ideas of what is okay, and then we kind of block out all the other stuff. So when we get to the New Testament, and this is what, like, I mean, I don't think I started off going in this direction, but it's so interesting to me because one of the professors at my university has spent a lot of time debating Dennis McDonald on his mimesis criticism and that kind of stuff. And it's so interesting to think that when we get to the question of Jesus, that's where the question is important.
Yeah, because it's like you're begging okay. So I have a little story. I had a friend who is I have a friend who's a Jehovah's Witness, and I said, "Why are you Jehovah's Witness?" And they said, I was looking at the evidence for God, and I decided that I need to believe in a religion that didn't have Christmas because that is, and then explained why Christmas was wrong, and then looked at all of Christianities, and then decided Jehovah's Witnesses was right. And I'm like, well, hang on, you're kind of already using Jehovah's Witness like ideas in the rejection of Christmas before you've even started analyzing. I was like, I feel like something else is going on here. I feel like, you know what I mean? So it's like the same thing. It's like looking at Jesus and going, well, he's the Son of God. So let's like so this context and everything else we've been using for the whole like the Hebrew Bible and everything else. We can't use that here. We have to. Whoa. Let's get down as Jordan Peterson says. Let's get down to brass tacks when someone asks him a simple question like, "Do you believe in God?" and he says it takes him 3 days to answer. Yeah, it's like let's get down to brass. Like that's what happens. Let's get down to brass tacks. Like it's I'm not saying that's what the professor is doing, but yeah.
No, I think you're spot on, because what we end up doing is trying to find a way to define what we're talking about as something else and not as a random written texts from antiquity. And that's, I think that's literally what I'm trying to get across. I'm losing my diction here. So, when we talk about things as literature, it's not that complicated because nobody cares. But the moment we say you're going to burn in hell, man, because of the literature I'm talking about, we have a problem.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden things get more complicated.
Exactly. And so it's just like, having spent so much time talking to other historians in religion that know that there are billions of people that think that their way of thinking about things are right. And then we end up with, like, you look at it from the other side and you're like, ooh, maybe we over evaluated our position,
Yeah. It's like the you see, I used to always think, the reason I know my God is real is because I experience the power of God falling over in the spirit. But then I started thinking like, well, like, what about like the Beatles? Like you see all like old black and white footage of like girls passing out when they see the Beatles and stuff. And it's just like, or like, my wife has said like every time she'd go to see a musical, she'd have the exact same feelings she'd have at church. This overwhelming like feeling of like excitement and awe and whatever it was.
I think me and your wife would get along.
Are you a musical kind of person?
So I grew up going to musicals. Like I was taken to see Cats.
That's my first musical I saw
when I was really, really young. And so musical theater was like this thing that was just a part of my childhood. And go on.
My wife, when she was on like government benefits, like Centrelink it's called here, and it was like not much. Like I'm talking like, you might have like $30 or $40 spare a fortnight on to buy like, people would buy like cigarettes or whatever. Amy didn't smoke, or like, you were just getting by. She would save all her money for ages, and then she would fly herself and her friend down to Sydney to see Wicked. And that's what she would spend all her money on. Like I'm talking like she didn't have like $2 to her name, and she did this 6 times over the course of like 5 years or something. Like 6 times she flew to Sydney to see Wicked, and then she's since seen it, since it's come up to Brisbane, another like 5 or 6 times, and then like she's seen it 12 times, I think.
It makes me so happy to hear that.
we've seen the Book of Mormon twice. She's seen the Lion King. She gets like every, like I say to her like I'll come once, but I'm not going to come like multiple times. Like I'm not a musical guy, but I've slowly gotten into it. But she's just obsessed.
You have to understand, like literally my best friends in the world are musical theater people. Who have been in the biggest productions in Europe, and
wow,
like my best friend is the guy who used to lead like Mamma Mia and the biggest music throughout the world tours. So totally on board with that.
You know, when I we're totally off track now, and I apologize everyone, but
sorry.
you can stop watching if you want. But but like I remember watching so I used to have like a really bad anxiety disorder, like a panic disorder. Actually, it was an actual panic disorder and OCD and things like that. But oh man, I remember going to see Lion King, and and have you seen the Lion King the musical?
Yes.
Have you seen it? Yeah. So so I'm sitting there and we're about to start, and I'm like all happy, like, and then it starts, and immediately the biggest panic attack of my life just comes on for some reason. And everything that was happening on stage, all I could think about like was, oh no, what if one of those people fall over? Oh no, like what if they're gonna drop Simba when he like they hold him up? And I'm having like the biggest, like it felt like I was looking into the gates of hell. Like that's how like I was but like on the outside I look like this.
I'm so sorry.
I just look like really happy and like fine, but on the inside I was like and I actually got up and left because like the panic attack was so bad. I went to the bathroom quickly. And
oh my god, I'm so sorry.
And
so
and they were like, we're looking for you, we couldn't find you. I was like, I was hiding in the bathroom, and like, you know, halfway like when the intermission came, I said to the person next to me, I'm like, I'm so sorry, I had to get up. And then she's like, what? Like I got up in the middle, and she's like, she didn't even remember, but like in my mind it was like this big thing. But yeah, like it was for a while there, like that weird panic attack that I had in the middle of this like theater where I thought literally I was gonna throw up or like be like, I was so anxious. Like sparked this like I started like when I would go to the cinemas, like I would be like, oh no, like as soon as it would start I'd have a panic attack. I got over that, but like it was a while there where like musicals and everything, like the idea of like being stuck in like knowing that I could ruin the performance if I like had to get out of there for some reason, like I all of a sudden realized that I needed to like leave or like, and I would ruin everyone's time, like just made me panic so bad. It was so weird. Anyway, I think I think my anecdotes have gone way off the track here. Let's we got some really interesting super chats. We got one big super chat from Hengfa Shi. He's actually they're actually left. I don't know if they're he or she, sorry, but they've actually left, but they will watch it in the future, I'm sure. They said Jay Campbell wrote that in India an eon is 4,320,000. Then say Valhalla has 540 doors, that 800 in Herja charge from 540 times 800 equals 3,400 40, oh my gosh, 43,000. Wait, 4,320. Oh my gosh, 43,000. No, what? 432,000. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Berosus apparently counting 432,000 years. By the way, the first king and the flood. Thoughts? So I didn't know what that meant. So I said, can you explain? And they said, yeah, sorry, the character limits suck. But basically, Campbell seems to be positing that this math being laced through such radically different mythological systems, such as Norse and Hindu, and Mesopotamia, might be related to astronomical observations. And so I was wondering, Dr. Monger's thoughts on the mathematical expression being present in these systems.
Yeah, and my answer is I don't know. I think that there are multiple possibilities. So the one thing is that there might be an astrological mathematical representation here. And if the case is that there is some kind of cyclical event that they are representing, that's fine. But what I think is more likely the case is that we're just kind of connecting random numbers.
Yeah, it's like the Bible code or whatever as well, right?
Yeah. So I don't think there's anything to it, but I mean, at the end of the day, like in 4,332,000 years, then maybe I will be.
Yeah. So Okay, so Matt, look, I just caught a glimpse of what we look like. So normally, someone in the comments, Fassi said they're gonna have a laugh when they rewatch this and listen to this part. I looked at our faces and like heard how we were talking just a second ago, and I'm drunk, but I can tell how drunk we are. So I'm gonna like slowly wrap up this conversation as we go.
Do we need to go
Because
home?
yeah, we need to. I need to go to bed. It's 4 a.m. for me.
Oh man.
Okay. Yeah. So like the tiredness is kicking in as well. But like yesterday I went to bed at 5 a.m. because I was video editing. But is there so going back to we're gonna have to finish off this bottle another time. But to go back to the Sumerian, Akkadian, oh my gosh, mate, be careful. Like I feel like drink water, jeez. Like I hope oh no.
I'm good. I'm gonna go make
Okay, you're good.
some man.
Okay, cool. So is there anything else, like any like large standout things from like the Enuma Elish, or I mean, of course there is, and everyone needs to go check out your YouTube channel, the Bible Written Backwards, linked in the description to see that. But is there anything else you want to mention before we kind of like wrap up this conversation?
Well, I think like I mean we didn't get to the really stuff that I haven't talked about on and stuff like that, but no worries. We'll just leave this as kind of like a, maybe someday I'll do something about it.
Yeah.
But, so like one of the things that's really cool for me is that it's not just the first 11 chapters of Genesis. So we're not just talking about creation. We're not just talking about Noah, but we're also talking about Psalms. Like there are Psalms that are so clearly reliant on Canaanite religion that are older, like texts we have before Hebrew, and on like the book of Job, which is this discussion between Job and his friends about whether or not he is like worthy or okay despite the horrible things that happened to him. Like we have a text called the Babylonian Theodicy, which this mirrors in so many ways. And so there's so many things that are so important to like understand that it's not just a dart into the randomness of the text, but we're talking about so many things that reflect ancient Babylonian understandings of reality, of literature, and they show up again and again in every genre and every different thing that we have. And so the Psalms are there, the Proverbs are there, the wisdom literature is there, like everything is there. And so it's like it's not like we're saying, hey, flood, we're all good,
and that's it. Yeah, it is.
It's just it's a very clear pattern. And I think it's important that we're not focused on that there's just like one good example and everybody's done. But it's all over the place.
When I did my research, like vaccine research, like Googling on the toilet, that's what like sorry. But like so like we got the Code of Hammurabi, the hymns of Aten, the instructions of Anamop, oh my gosh, everything in the primeval history, the Enuma Elish, the flood narratives. Are there any other major things, like if someone wanted to go look up things besides the stuff that I just mentioned and probably said wrong, is there any other things that people could look up?
No. So I would just say start there.
Okay.
Like, and again, like let's circle back to where we were. Like read slowly. Like read the texts and not your own expectations.
Yeah. Okay.
And think about what it means that older texts literally are saying the same thing.
No, yeah. So first, it's like first approach them, like literally, like textually. Just look at them. Don't like go into them with bias, and then work out that, like work out the theological, philosophical, psychological things later.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dr. Matthew Monger, it's been amazing to have you on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Of course, if you subscribe to Deep Drinks, you will make it to heaven. That's a guarantee. We have Nila604 Atheist coming on to tell his creation story. We have Nuri Khan coming on to talk about Islam apologetics. I put this dude, Daniel, in here because when they had a debate together, he blurred her face. And I was like, you know what? You're a piece of shit. And then we have Dr. Josh, of course, coming on, which will be awesome. And we have a few more awesome guests happening and a panel coming up. The Bible was written backwards, the best channel on YouTube. Go check it out if you haven't already, and keep pressuring Dr. Matthew Monger to create some stuff. He will eventually get there one day when he finishes his book or something. And of course, if you want to support this channel, check out Patreon. You can see some behind-the-scenes stuff here. And check out the book that was mentioned previously, and it's in the chat, and it's also on the Deep Drinks list of books that I recommend now, so you can check that as well. All links are in the description, and that this has been wonderful. I think. Look, I'm sorry, Kip. I think this is the drunkest the Deep Drinks has ever gotten. I'm not, so I don't know. Maybe we might have to try and break that record, but it's definitely up there. It's in the top 3 of yourself, Kip, and Aaron Adair when we drank Beju. So there's been a couple of episodes. And by the way, it's not I'm not an alcoholic, all right? It's not the guest chooses the drink.
Man, but so Kip was here in May.
Oh yeah, can you actually? We're not going to end now. I just want to. Can you tell us about your adventures together in Norton in Norway?
Kip is the. I mean, I've said this before, but Kip is the only person I like, other than my.
Yeah.
And so, like we had this amazing day where Kip was here. And we went out, and I'm serious. Like, I think we drank like 5 bottles of wine and a bottle of whiskey. Like, we were so wasted, but me and Kip had such a good time as well. So, like, Kip.
Yeah, I remember sending Kip something, and he said, "I'm with Matt Monger," and I was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "Drinking," and he sent a photo of you guys like at like some bars or like some like cafe or something. I can't remember what it was. Yeah.
No, we lost track at that point. but no, so like, I mean, yeah, no, Kip and I are good friends. So we do tend to drink together, but so what I think is really important is that we're interested in being able to what's up?
I just poured whiskey all over my keyboard, so it might stop working, but keep going.
Anyway, no, but I mean, I think there's just something really great about being able to let go and talk about the things that are, and when Kip's around, we have a really good time, and we talk about the things that are important to us, and that's made a big difference in my life, and I think me and Kip have a way of thinking about reality that is, is important. And
Mm.
so we've definitely learned a lot, or I've learned a lot from him. And yeah, so he was here. I don't know. It's been almost 2 months now, but we had a really good time. And there's something about being able to meet people that that are that knowledgeable about the literature that we're interested in, and then also being able to say, hey, it's not gonna make me suffer forever in hell to think about it in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like getting rid of that stigma.
Yep.
There is my psychologist, because I call it the pudding club, where I post on Twitter like when I'm depressed, I'll like hide myself away in a dark room and like eat spaghetti and like lie in bed all day, and I need that. I need time to stay useless. But what I'll call it that, needing time to stay useless. But my psychologist will say, it's relaying responsibility. It's like you need time to just let go, and sometimes like I'll need that by myself. Sometimes I'll need that with my friends. But it's so important to have those people in your life where you can just be stupid and or not even stupid, but like you don't need to put on any facades. You can just be yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. And not be afraid of being canceled or having expressed scholarly positions that might get you into trouble or whatever. Like, but seriously, like, we can wrap up soon, but like, David, I seriously appreciate your channel so much, because what you do is make people just get drunk.
Sometimes I don't make them get drunk. YouTube, I don't make them get drunk. No, I know what you mean. Because
like, you encourage saying, instead of saying, I'm going to tell you what my last article just said, that people talk.
Yeah.
And like, that's where I grew up. Like, I grew up in Virginia, like in the South, where people just said whatever they wanted. And it's just so different when you get into the world of academia, where you have to pretend all the time. So you do such a good job of asking people to say, hey, drink with me, start saying stuff, we'll be good.
Well, I think I'm fucking amazing. I always tell, like, I really, no, I don't, but there are you know, everyone has like some sort of an ego or whatever. But the one thing that you know, for everything I do think of myself, like, oh, I've got a good understanding of this or good understanding of that. The one thing that people do have compliment me on is my ability to like my like wearing my heart on my sleeve. I'll tell you how I feel. And I'm pretty honest and open. I don't have secrets. Like, I'm not very good at keeping secrets, or it's actually something I've worked on. I'm just very open and honest, and I think that kind of rubs off on people because. And I was saying to someone the other day that I'm like I've got big brain but small brain. Like, I'm good at kind of I'm wanting to like know all this stuff, but I'm also a little bit simple. I'm a little bit of a simpleton. So like when I bring on like experts like yourself, I go like, oh, so what is Akkadian? Like, I bring it right back down to like, so everyone can understand. And I think that's like my skill set in life is like being real, I guess. And that's what I try to do anyway. So do you know what? When I first started a YouTube channel, I was trying not to be that person. I was trying to be like the new Christopher Hitchens or something. And then I went on to fucking Tang, now called The Flavor, and Jenna, fucking Jenna. But by the way, I love Tang, love Jenna, I love Oz. But she made up this fucking rumor that I could, that I wanted to rap battle Oz. And I didn't. I can't rap. But the pressure of everyone there and stuff, like, I was, you know, and I decided to at the end to try and rap battle. And all I said was, out of time, out of key, out of everything, was Tang Gang. I'm here with Tang Gang. Heathen Queen's a bitch. That's all. That's pretty much all I said. and it was the most embarrassing. I was embarrassed for 3 days, and I realized I was never going to be that person. I was never going to be that like Christopher Hitchens, and then I'm kind of a quirk. My psychologist calls me quirky. So I like to say. So yeah, I hope people can feel comfortable with me, and that's what I try to bring to the show.
Well, I mean, as after you've said that, like, there's nothing you've done today that was bad. So
Okay, all right, good. Well, okay. Well, thank you, Professor Matthew Monger, for coming on. It's been absolutely awesome. I really appreciate it. And guys, check out the links in the description. We have some amazing guests coming up. I think I've said that like 5 times now, but we're ending the show. Love you guys. Talk later. Bye.